Craig Garrison, City Planner with the City of Corpus Christi. It seems like we have a quorum, and it does seem like the COVID briefing is over as well. And so co-chair Dees, I believe you will be chair for the day.
All righty.
So do I have to stop her from being co-host?
You have to share.
You're not using.
Share an agenda.
If you want to give it a minute or two to see if we have anybody else come in.
Sure, we can give it a few minutes.
Mulder.
I think it's frozen. I don't know what's going on with her internet. It's like, ow, mom.
Vice Chairman Dees,
I'm present.
Commissioner Freeman,
Here.
Commissioner Della Garza,
Present.
Commissioner Fontenot, Commissioner Brown,
Present.
Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner Wanzer,
Present.
and Commissioner Mendez.
Present.
Quorum established.
All right. We're going to have a reading of the last minutes.
Yes, sir. You can call for the approval of minutes for February 25th, 2021. And this should have been emailed to all commissioners. And we can pull up the minutes on our screen.
Anybody have any questions or comments on those minutes?
No.
Okay, we'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Which commissioner was that first?
Freeman.
Commissioner Mendez, second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we call roll?
Okay. Vice Chairman Dees,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Della Garza,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Wanzer,
Aye.
and Commissioner Mendez.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, at this time, I don't believe we had any other business besides the historic preservation meeting. Is that correct, Craig?
Comment for the non-related items.
Actually, co-chair Dees, we do have public comment for non-related items. It's item number 3.
Sure. If we have anybody present that would like to comment.
Did we receive any comments?
I don't believe we have anybody present, and we do not have any comments through email or phone or mail.
Moving on from item number 3 to item number 4, community meeting with the historic preservation plan.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I do have Nina Nixon Mendez to introduce the community meeting for historic preservation plan.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Nina Nixon Mendez, and I'm Assistant Director of Development Services and Historic Preservation Officer. And I have the pleasure of introducing our consultant for the update of our historic preservation plan, Steph McDougall. She is waving, or she was waving, with her smiling face. So you can see her on WebEx. And if you recall, Steph led our first meeting concerning the historic preservation plan update back in November. And so now we're looking forward to the report related to all the work she's undertaken since that first community meeting. And so at this time, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Steph for our second community meeting on our historic preservation plan.
Thanks, Nina. I'm going to really quickly share my screen, and you should all be able to see that now. Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. Since we met last fall, we have been busy, and tonight I'm going to share with you what we've been up to since then, what we've learned, and next steps in the project. We'll end with questions and answers, and you can submit those anytime during my presentation through Facebook, YouTube, or via email at dsoutreach@cctexas.com. Craig Garrison from Development Services will collect all of your questions, and either I or city staff will answer them at the end. I'm just going to ask anybody who has not muted your microphone, if you could do that now, that would help out a lot. We've got a little bit of household background noise coming through. Okay, thank you. All right, well, we're going to cover 5 topics today, and you do not have to have even heard anything about this project before tonight. So for those of you who've been participating, bear with me while I recap where we've been so far and make sure we're all starting off on the same page. My firm is McDougall Preservation. We're a historic preservation consulting firm, and we help cities like Corpus Christi figure out what they want to keep around for future generations and how to do that. The city of Corpus Christi has had a historic preservation plan since 1974, and it was last updated in 1992, right after a historic resources survey was completed that identified historic buildings in the downtown and surrounding residential areas. In 2017, our colleagues at Hardy Heck Moore, also a historic preservation consulting firm, completed a new survey of the downtown area. And now we're updating the preservation plan. These are really common activities undertaken by cities that have historic preservation programs. So we started last fall, and it's about a year-long project. And by the time this is approved by council, we'll be close to the end of the year 2021. And so the plan will cover the time period through 2032, about 10 years. And this project is funded in part by a grant from the Certified Local Government Program for the National Park Service, as administered by the Texas Historical Commission. And we want to thank them for their support and funding for this project. Okay, whoever is having dinner, if you could mute your microphone, that would be great. Okay, so to date, we have completed 3 of the 4 parts of the project. We began by reviewing the history of historic preservation in Corpus Christi to understand what has happened in the past and also what has not happened and why. For example, Corpus Christi has no designated historic districts and only a few designated landmarks, and that's really unusual for a city that's been doing preservation for this long. Now, in part, that's because the city doesn't have a dedicated preservation planner with training in architectural history, but also because there's no local preservation nonprofit to do some of that work. And usually those two things are present in cities that have a lot of historic preservation activity going on. So after we finished that review, we had our first public meeting with you, as Nina mentioned, and a tremendous number of you viewed and participated in that meeting. So I want to thank all of you for being engaged in this effort. It really, really makes a big difference, and we appreciate it. We then conducted telephone interviews with more than 24 stakeholders to talk about preserving Corpus Christi's history and what you want to keep around for future generations. And we used all of the good input that we got to develop questions for a survey that went out to the entire community, because it's really important to hear what individual people have to say, but we can't just take that and run with it. We wanted to know the extent to which those ideas, opinions, and comments were representative of the whole community. So most of the rest of my presentation is going to be about the survey and what we learned from what you told us. First of all, the survey was designed to be available and accessible to everyone in Corpus Christi. We did not want anybody to have a computer or an internet connection or speak English in order to participate. So the survey was available in English and Spanish on paper and online, and you can get help at the library or call Development Services, and someone would read the survey questions to you over the phone and write down your answers. The city got out the word about the survey in as many different ways as they could, because your opinions are important, and this preservation plan needs to reflect what you want. So we asked questions to achieve 3 goals. Number 1, to know how well respondents represent the whole community. Number 2, to find out what places and spaces are important to you. And number 3, to learn what you think about the different kinds of historic preservation activities that the city could do. And wow, did you come through? More than 750 of you took the survey, which was awesome. It was incredible. We were so excited. And these were mostly taken in English online. And in addition to answering questions, you provided nearly 13,000 individual comments, which is fantastic. It was a lot, but it was really great. And we're so pleased that everybody took so much time to share their thoughts with us and provide such meaningful, thoughtful, insightful information. And here's what we learned about you. Most respondents are already interested in or involved in historic preservation, and that makes sense. You're more likely to take a survey about something that already interests you. And we asked everyone to tell us what zip code they live in, and most respondents live on the south side of town. We also wanted to know if Corpus Christians from different ethnic backgrounds were represented proportionally in the survey responses compared to the city's population. So we asked respondents to self-identify. And what we found was that white people who are not Hispanic were overrepresented in the survey compared to the larger population, and all other groups were underrepresented. And that means that as we use this information to craft our recommendations and the city uses it to make decisions, we need to keep that in mind and potentially seek out more information from Indigenous Hispanic people, from Black people, from Asian people, etc. So now let's look at the survey results. Overall, for most questions, about 60% of respondents were very positive about historic preservation generally and want the city to do more to make historic preservation possible in Corpus Christi. About 1/3 of respondents consistently had no opinion, and a very, very small number, only 5%, were generally negative about historic preservation. Now we can summarize the 4 main ideas coming out of the survey as follows. Number 1, downtown revitalization is very important to you. You had a lot to say about why. And our key takeaway here is that there are strong support for programs that would improve downtown Corpus Christi. So that's really important to know. That needs to be a priority. You also told us that the city needs to do a much better job of communicating what they're doing, what historic preservation even is, and how it works. And we've talked to Development Services about the historic preservation portion of their website. And you know, they have really done a lot in the past year to improve the information that they're offering there. It still has room for improvement, and but they are working on that. So thank you for providing that direction for us too. We also heard a lot about the condition of streets in existing neighborhoods. Now, this is not part of our project, but Nina Nixon Mendez from Development Services is going to talk about that a little bit at the end. And you also told us that the city needs to pay attention to and spend money on existing neighborhoods, particularly those near the downtown, and not just new neighborhoods. And finally, you told us that you want the city to make it possible for property owners to designate some historic landmarks and historic districts in a way that can prevent demolition if the Landmark Commission denies a request to demolish a building. Typically, that's how landmark commissions work. Corpus Christi is unusual in that you currently only can delay demolitions or other changes that the Landmark Commission denies for 120 days. Now, we are not proposing that Corpus Christi changes the rules for things that have already been designated, but the city could create an additional class of landmark and historic district that definitively preserves them by using a no means no approach, like most cities do, so that people could decide if they wanted to designate a building or a district under the regular landmark or district designations or under a protected landmark and district designation, but that would be up to the property owner. And we don't recommend that the city, go around making designations like that on their own, but they should make it possible for you to do that if you want to. Now, we wanted to tell you about the places and spaces most often mentioned when we asked what you wanted to prioritize for preservation. And although we also got a lot of comments from people saying, tear it down, the old county courthouse was #1 on your list of things you wanted to preserve. Understanding that the city has no control over that. That's a county thing. They own it. The city doesn't. People did want us to know that that was important to them. And so we're sharing that with you today. Heritage Park, which, as you know, is a collection of historic houses in Corpus Christi. Also very, very important. People want to make sure that that's preserved. The Ritz Theater, #3 on the list. So we know that the folks over at the Ritz have been working hard, raising money. That takes a lot of time sometimes, but they're making progress. And so we think it would be great if the Ritz was to be restored and put back into productive use. Very excited to see that on the list. And downtown buildings generally got a lot of mentions. As you saw earlier, people said that revitalizing downtown was very important. And the other places that got mentioned often were the Art Museum South Texas, Corpus Christi Cathedral, parks in general, but especially Cole Park and its amphitheater, and the water gardens. So we wanted to thank everybody for telling us what you want to prioritize, because that makes our job so much easier. We also asked about neighborhoods, and here are the top 10 neighborhoods that you indicated would make great historic districts. Downtown, obviously, talked about that. Del Mar subdivision, Uptown, Ocean Drive, Morningside, and shout out to the Morningside Preservation Society if y'all are on the call. You're doing great work. But that doesn't make it a historic district that's protected. Some people are really confused about that. They think Morningside is already a historic district because of the Preservation Society. It is not. Hillcrest and Washington Coles, Saxett Heights and Oak Park, Lamar Park, Besser Park, and Six Points area. And as you can see on this map, these neighborhoods are really, all over the place. They're not just concentrated in one area. And that's really important to know too. Okay, so finally, those people who had a positive opinion about historic preservation generally were also in favor of the city offering financial incentives to encourage historic preservation, but only under specific circumstances. And we heard you loud and clear. You told us that if the city does offer financial incentives, and this could take the form of an exemption of city property tax, it could be a low interest loan, it could be a facade improvement grant for a downtown building. There are a lot of different things that the city can do that other cities are using very successfully already. And we're going to include that information in the plan with our recommendations. You all told us that if the city offers financial incentives, you wanted to have some criteria. Makes sense. So you told us projects and owners need to qualify by meeting fair and consistent eligibility criteria. And what we heard especially was you don't want rich developers getting taxpayer dollars. You said we should consider basing eligibility on financial need along the same lines. A lot of people said this should be done on a reimbursement basis so that we make sure that work gets done. And then finally, you agreed that if people are going to get money from the city to do work on their buildings, they should be willing to follow rules about what they can and cannot do. And that's really typical in historic preservation across the country. Generally, if you're getting grant funds or tax exemptions or things like that, you have to hold up your end of the bargain, and that usually means following some rules. And so finally, I wanted to share this quote with you, which I think really summarizes the feedback that you gave us and the sense of optimism and hope and wanting better things for Corpus Christi that we heard in the survey. And this person said, this city can reestablish itself as the jewel of the Gulf Coast and bring tourism back. We need to cut out the decay and modernize, provide favorable tax incentives for businesses, reimagine what downtown can be, and make it a destination that's safe and family friendly. Rein in the out-of-town property squatters who are not doing anything with their properties. Let's see some action, is what you're telling us. So there are a couple of other things that I wanted to share with you that we gleaned from what you told us, and this is really important. Number one, the citizens of Corpus Christi have had some negative experiences with historic preservation, particularly around Memorial Coliseum and the Old County Courthouse. And those past negative experiences are probably likely to hinder future efforts by the city to do good work in preservation. So to counteract those, citizens need to see some success stories. You need to see that things are going to work. And we get it. It's hard to have confidence in a process if you haven't seen it work well, or if you've had disappointing experiences in the past. So we're looking for opportunities for those success stories, and we're going to be including that in the preservation plan. We also recognize that there was a lot of misinformation, misconceptions, misunderstandings, just not really understanding what historic preservation is and does. And so an education and awareness building program really is needed to help address those things, get the right information out there, but also set and manage expectations. We heard a lot about the city should be doing X, when that's not something the city does, so, or can do. And so we want to make sure that when we're talking about historic preservation, we're really setting expectations realistically so that you're not disappointed unnecessarily. Now, we talked a little bit about making it possible for the Landmark Commission to actually prevent demolitions in the future. And we just think the city needs to provide a stronger framework. And you told us that community-initiated projects and community-driven historic preservation activities are the way to go, and we agree. These things are always better when they bubble up from the community and then the city helps make them possible. And there are a lot of people who want to be involved. 212 people provided their phone numbers or email addresses and said, I want to know what I can do to make this happen. That's a nonprofit organization waiting to be made, right? There are a lot of people who want to have something to do with this, who want to be part of Corpus Christi's historic preservation success story. And that's awesome. That's a great starting point. And it's going to be necessary because the city can't do it by themselves. They need nonprofit partners. They need citizen participation. That's what's successful in other cities. If you look at San Antonio, they have the San Antonio Conservation Society, Preservation Austin, Preservation Houston, Preservation Dallas, the Plano Conservancy. All of these organizations make possible good work in the city and by the city. And so that is going to be a key to Corpus Christi's success. And not just, making people aware or, having events or programs, maybe some workshops, but really to get the community involved, capture information, continue being a voice for preservation in Corpus Christi. And that's going to help preserve older neighborhoods and revitalize downtown, as well as create an environment for things like small business startups, which we know are a great fit for historic downtown buildings because they're often not gigantic companies and they can easily fit in incubator spaces and co-working spaces and things like that. Okay. Nina Nixon-Mendez now is going to talk about a few other things that many of you mentioned, but which are not part of this project. So I'll turn it over to Nina.
Thanks, Deb. And let me pause just to say we got a message from our broadcast team, and we've had some audio difficulties with YouTube. And IT is working on it, but I did want to inform all our listeners that the city's Facebook page is active and it is working. I did want to briefly address some concerns that were expressed during the survey. We did have an opportunity for citizens to provide some open-ended responses, and some of the concerns that came up is street conditions and improvement activities, as well as code enforcement concerns. And of course, when you're dealing with historic and older neighborhoods, the infrastructure oftentimes is aged as well. So I did want to mention some of the programs that we have available, and with the 2020 bond, for example, there was $61 million that was dedicated to street improvement, reconstruction, and new construction. And for citizens that may not know how to access that list to that bond program, it's on cctexas.com/bond2020. So that's pretty easy to access, and it provides a wonderful summary of all the different bond projects. The other tool that citizens can access to look at projects that are planned or in the works is the infrastructure maintenance plan. And this is a 5-year street maintenance plan. It's on our Public Works webpage. And it's a really great webpage because it has an interactive map and a link to submit a service request. So if there's an issue with a street, that gives you an opportunity to submit a request there. The interesting thing about the street maintenance program, it's a 5-year rolling list, and it's updated from time to time, so you can see what streets have been completed and what's in progress, and then what is planned. And it not only includes residential streets, but it also includes collectors and higher order streets as well. The code enforcement also came up with some of the comments made in the survey. And so I did want to enforce the fact that you could report online. And we provided that link here in the presentation. And there's also an app that you can download, My City app. And it's a really nice app because you can pay your utility bills and do other things with the app, but you can also report any kind of code enforcement concerns through that app. So we sure want to make, this information available to the public because there were concerns related to that. And Steph, we'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Nina. So, what's next for the Historic Preservation Plan project? Well, you still have opportunities to get involved. The first thing is keep an eye out for the draft preservation plan coming in May. We are working on it right now. And then we'll have a third community meeting. The date is not yet set. We'll announce it as soon as we have that finalized. But we'll give you a couple of weeks at least to have the plan in your hands to look at it before we have the community meeting. And then we'll walk you through the plan. And that gives us an opportunity to hear from you after you've already had a chance to look at it. But if you don't want to do that, we'll give you enough information in the presentation at that third community meeting that you can still ask questions and get information from that. But we really hope that when we publish the plan, you'll take the time to look at it and let us know what you think. We really want to hear from you. So after that is done, we'll be revising the plan based on your feedback and then incorporating your comments before it's finalized and then taking the plan through the adoption process. This project is scheduled to wrap up in September of 2021. And so, it seemed like forever. We had a million years to get this done when we started, and now it feels like we are really closing in on having some good stuff for you to look at and being able to take this across the finish line. So we're excited about that. We're excited to show you what we have coming up for you. And then finally, we want to hear from you. You can keep up with the latest developments in the project at the website cctexas.com/HPP for Historic Preservation Plan. And you can also let us know what you think with a phone call or email to the number or address shown here. Priscilla Ramirez in Development Services is the project lead. You can call her directly or send an email to dsoutreach@cctexas.com. And if you'd rather send us message or some mail through the Postal Service, that's great too, at P.O. Box 9277. And the zip for that is 78469. So that's my presentation. And at this time, I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Good afternoon, Steph. This is Craig Garrison, City Planner with the City of Corpus Christi. We do have a first question from the DS Outreach email, and I'll go ahead and read here. It says, I think it would be nice to have a Corpus Christi history app that you could download on your phone. Then whenever you go around town, it could give you info on what historical events happen at that spot or in that area. I guess that could also be like an interactive app where you could also listen to someone retell the historical events, etc. They mentioned that tourists might like this as well. So they're kind of asking, is that a possibility?
So if you're asking technically if that's a possibility, absolutely. Other cities have apps like this. And of course, Corpus Christi could do that too. So thanks for that suggestion. That is really great. I think it's a fantastic idea. We'll definitely include it in a list of things that the city could do, or that a local preservation partner, nonprofit organization could take up. But I think either one of those things, or either one of those entities could certainly make that happen. And it's absolutely possible. We'll provide some examples of those in the plan so that you all will have an opportunity to go look and see what other people are doing. Thanks.
You bet. And the next, so these are 2 comments from Facebook. We're running a little low in questions, so we do urge citizens to ask any questions on Facebook or through our DS outreach email. This is, we need a rails to trails historical marker. This is off of Highway 44. Our neighborhood is about to celebrate its 100-year in 2026, and this is coming from Saxett Heights neighborhood.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for that. The Rails to Trails program is really specific. I believe that is run by a nonprofit. So there are a lot of different kinds of historic markers. The ones you're probably most familiar with come from the Texas Historical Commission. They're the ones that you see along the road. There'll be a brown sign that says historic marker. Then you've got a big plaque. And those are all managed through the County Historical Commission system. So in this county, the Nueces County Historical Commission, which is, I think, one of the most prolific marker getters in the state, has a very active historic marker program. But I'm not familiar with the Rails to Trails program, but I'm pretty sure that the Rails to Trails Conservancy is an independent nonprofit organization. I can look into that and provide some more information back. But I did want to let you know that that city governments can also, or local nonprofit organizations, can also create their own interpretive plaques or panels to put up in places that are important to them, to tell different kinds of stories than the stories that are on typical historic markers that come from the Texas Historical Commission. And we see those in a lot of cities. If you've been to Galveston, you can see that they have a lot of these big signs in their downtown that tell about historic buildings. We're a little worse for wear after all the hurricanes and need some refurbishing, but they have those. And other cities do that too, where they'll have placards or signs on historic buildings or in historic store windows that tell the story of that building specifically, with pictures from, old newspapers or, old photographs. And so that can be a really good thing for a city to do potentially, or for a local nonprofit to do. So thank you very much for that suggestion.
And then Steph, thank you for your answer. We do have a piggyback off that,
Okay.
There's a comment of Port Avenue historical marker. So they're saying that Port and Staples needs a historical marker at both of those locations. So they seem to be pinpointing historically important places to city staff. Yeah.
That's great. I'm going to pass along this information to Kathy Weimer, who is the chair of the Nueces County Historical Commission, and let her know that you've provided this information. I would say, whoever you are, thank you. And if you want to follow up with this, get in touch with the Nueces County Historical Commission, talk to them, because they are the marker people and they get that done for the state of Texas here in Nueces County.
All right, next question comes from Facebook, and this is, how can we learn about what other cities do as far as nonprofits supporting preservation? Are there ones that really are there ones that stand out to you?
Yeah, so that is a great question. We're actually going to include those case studies and best examples in the preservation plan. One of the ones that that we are suggesting that you all might look at as a model is in Plano. So the Plano Conservancy has been around for quite some time. Plano is very similar to Corpus Christi in terms of size. It also established its first historic preservation ordinance in the early 1970s, a couple years before you did. And they have a really great nonprofit. Now, it hasn't been smooth sailing for them all the time. You know, the city and the Conservancy have struggled with, you know, trying to figure out what to do and raising money and things like that. But the important thing is the city and the nonprofit have a great relationship. It's very collaborative. They work together to accomplish common goals that are identified by the community. And that's really the hallmark of a successful organization. Now, you might say, okay, who else? And I would say that depends on what you're asking about. So a lot of nonprofit organizations have things that they really specialize in. Some of them are responsible for historic buildings. Like in Houston, the Heritage Society basically manages Houston's version of Heritage Park. And they do all the maintenance and they raise all the money and do the tours of all the houses and all of that kind of stuff. They do all of the interpretation, and that's mainly what they do. So, you know, it kind of depends on the city and the nonprofit organization, but Preservation Austin is a really good one. They do tours. They have a lot of educational content and information that they provide. They do workshops for real estate agents. They do workshops for how to fix your historic wood windows. There are a lot of good ones, and we are going to provide you with examples and case studies from different places, not only in Texas, but around the United States, to show you what is possible and also connect you with people who are already doing this, because the historic preservation community is extremely friendly and extremely collegial. And if you need something and you say, hey, can I ask you questions? People will drop what they're doing to help you. They really want to see everyone succeed. So yes, we will provide you with as many case studies and examples as we can do within your budget, but at least one for each of the topics that we're going to cover in the plan.
Thank you, Steph. Next question is, was Old Bayview Cemetery mentioned in the survey in any way?
Yes, it was. Several people mentioned Old Bayview. And we did the National Register nomination for Old Bayview. It was listed this year. So we're really familiar with it. Old Bayview has a lot of conservation needs. There's been some vandalism, people tipping over grave markers. If you've been out there, it's not a lawn cemetery, and that's fine because it historically would not have had a grassy lawn. But there's some work to be done there yet. And we previously, before the pandemic, had a meeting with Assistant City Manager Keith Selman and Karen Howden from the Nueces County Historical Commission and your then Park Superintendent, who's no longer with the city, to talk about a master plan, a survey, an inventory of grave markers, and some other stuff that could happen to kind of keep that project moving along. As you know, hot taxes, which are hotel occupancy taxes, are down because of the pandemic. People weren't staying in hotels. And that was a source of many of the funds that the city has used in the past for cemetery activities and cemetery improvements. So that's all on hold at the moment. But we're hoping that as the pandemic eases and things pick back up, we're able to re-engage with that effort and continue moving that forward. But in the meantime, we've got it listed on the National Register, which makes it eligible for some additional grant money from other sources, but we also managed to get the 2003 marker survey for all the grave markers, including photographs of what they looked like at that time and their locations. And we used GIS to combine that information with the ground penetrating radar study that the County Historical Commission had done in 2017 and matched that up. And there are a whole bunch of places where there had been markers in 2003 and they're not there now. Those graves are unmarked now. But we got all of that into a geodatabase using GIS, which is a geographic information system. It's a spatial representation of data, and got that over to the city. So the city has all of that information now, and that was part of our project as well.
Thank you, Steph. We currently have no more questions. We do have one comment from a local historian about the earlier question about building a historical app. And they stated that the groundwork for this app was laid with a Frontera Festival, which is a historical festival here in 2018, but that the app's no longer in the work because the festival became inactive, or it's no longer happening.
Okay. I have talked to somebody about the Frontera Festival during the stakeholder comments and some of my additional interviews. So I'll get back in touch with them and ask more about the app. Thanks. And no more questions? Oh my gosh, you guys, I love answering your questions. Think of some more.
Do the commissioners have any questions at this time?
Commissioner Dees, I'll make a comment here. Jillian, our former chair, has some Frontera. So that will be something that I'm hoping will move forward. Also, our current chair, Christine, has some good information on, we're talking about the interactive site when you pull up to a historic place, and you can click on this app and it'll give you some information on that. This is something we talked about a couple of years ago, and she actually has some of that information that she's been working on privately, and I'm sure she's about ready to share some of that. So I'm glad to see that people are interested in these kind of things, these things that we've all been wanting to work on too.
That's great. Thank you very much. What else? ¿Qué más?
This is Commissioner Della Garza. I was just wondering if you have seen any luck with hashtags, with social media, as far as historic preservation locally?
You know, so I'm just going to admit right now, I just turned 55, and I am not the best person to ask about social media hashtags, but I do have a lot of very young, hip colleagues who use social media way more than I do. And I know that that can be effective. However, you have to be really strategic about how you do it, and really get the word out to people who could be using those hashtags so that you get some critical mass right from the jump. So, you know, you just saying, hey, I'm going to create a hashtag is not as likely to be picked up and start trending as if you have 100 people and you've all agreed that you're going to go to this event and start using that hashtag. When we see that being really effective, it's because there's been some kind of organized campaign around it generally. But yeah, it can be really effective in, I think, the right circumstances. And, you know, it's just like any kind of marketing effort or awareness building effort. You know, you want to have a purpose for it, and you want people to be able to see something happening because they participated. So, for example, if you had a Places and Spaces That Matter event where you said this weekend, go take a picture of things that you care about in Corpus Christi that you want to keep around for the future and post it with this hashtag, and we'll get all of those. And that's a way for us to know, what you want, and then we'll tell you what you told us. And from that, we're going to pick something that, the thing that got the most mentions, and and that will get a grant or something like that. That can be really powerful. So there are a lot of different ways to use hashtags. Like I said, that's not my specific area of expertise, but there are people who do a ton of that kind of work, and not just, using hashtags, but also researching how they can be used most effectively. And so if you're interested in something like that, we absolutely can get some information for you.
And Steph, I think I can add on. I know that the National Trust for Historic Preservation uses it's their saving places, and then their hashtag is I can pull it up right now. It's hashtag tell the full story. They're really putting an emphasis on sites, locations, and also all of the key players and actors that were part of that history. And so kind of delving deep into those histories. And
Can I just make one comment about that, Craig?
Yeah.
So tell the full story really refers to not just telling white history. For a long time, white history has been kind of the main thing. That's history. That's the default. And then we also have Black history. We also have Mexican American history, but they're over here in their own little special buckets. That's typically been the way that we've approached that in the US. And so tell the full story means tell the whole thing. If you go to a place where people were enslaved, the plantation house tours now increasingly are not just talking about the people who lived in the big house, they're talking about people who built the big house and who made it run and things like that. So when we talk about tell the full story, we're talking about tell the story of all the people who were involved in this place.
Thank you. And I have heard that there is some active Instagrams here in Corpus Christi for kind of highlighting. I'm not sure if I can really highlight their names and kind of publish them. But if you look through Instagram, some people are out there taking great photos and telling great stories.
That's fantastic. What else? Commissioners? Well, Craig, what do you think? Are we out of questions?
We don't seem to have any other questions coming in. We can sit here if the commissioners have one more before adjournment for our landmark commission meeting today.
Yeah, we've got time for another question if you have one.
Commission, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank McDo Preservation for the tremendous work that they're doing on the historic preservation plan. Thank you so much, Steph, and your team. And we look forward to seeing our draft publication in the near future. And as you said, once drafted, we'll have that available for public viewing and for discussion at a forthcoming community meeting. And we will be announcing that particular date as soon as the date is finalized. And that concludes our meeting.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And please don't hesitate. Send in your questions and comments to dsoutreach@cctexas.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.
But I'll look forward to hearing a recap later. Thank you so much.
Steph, can we get a printed copy of the presentation you did today?
Yes, Absolutely. I'll send a PDF over to Craig and he can distribute that to you.
Yes, man. I believe that's the end of our business for today. We have no new business. I call for a motion for adjournment.